Hello crafters and welcome back. This is Sandy here from Stamping with Sandy, and I am working on felt tube number 3, introducing you to Fergus. In the first video, we took Fergus the Gnome apart to show the different parts, and in the second video, we completed his little hat. Okay, this is video number 3. We're going to work on his coat. So the pieces that we need for today are the back, the 2 sides, the 2 arms, and then we're going to use this little band that we originally used for the hat, and we're going to make little cuffs on his little sleeves. Okay, so that's today's video. You're going to need some needles and some thread, and again, if you haven't watched the other videos, the thread that I'm using to match my felt is DMC 518. And then for the lighter color, it is DMC 828. Okay, so collect your supplies and let's sit down and have a little crafting fun. I like to start with the little arms. So what I'm going to do is push everything else aside and we're going to start here. I need to zoom in a little bit more for you. There we go. All right. You're going to line up, I'll use my pin here. The second hole here, leave 1 spare. Okay. And obviously I've got a thread, reasonable size because these are short little guys, so you don't need a whole bunch. I'm not going to cut this until I'm finished, but what I am doing is I'm lining up the hole at the other end here, and I'm going to put one of my binding clips on there because I'm going to stitch through the material that doesn't have any holes in it. Okay, and this is one of the reasons why you need a sharp point needle. This will help you with this. And I have a knot in the end of this thread, and I'm just going to leave it on the back side because this is going to get buried in the seam when we sew this together anyway, okay? But it's not a very big knot, so I'm going to hold on to it with my finger just until I get a couple of stitches in so that it will kind of hold its own. So you want to go straight down into the hole, try and not go on an angle. And again, we're going to do kind of a running stitch all the way across, and that kind of leaves a space every second one. We're going to turn at the far end and come back and complete the stitches. So again, you want to pull mostly up and down. Try and not pull this way so that you don't tear the fabric. We're going through 2 layers, so it's pretty sturdy, but even still, don't pull too hard. Don't yank on it. Let it go through smoothly. And you want it taut, but you don't want it to pucker. Okay, so I got one more to do here. And then I'm going to remove my clip. I don't need that anymore. Hold this with my thumb and pointy finger on the other side and do that last stitch. And the last stitch, be a little bit more careful of because you're going through 2 holes, so you don't want to tear it. And then you're going to reverse and you're going to come back and you're going to go through all the ones that you missed. And again, I'm trying to stay on the inside of the stitching, and I'm trying not to split the stitch so that it looks nice and even. Okay. Really cold and rainy here today. It's our regular June typhoon weekend. We get this every year. All the hills around us have got snow. So if you're noticing that my video is a little bit darker today, it's because I did the other 2 yesterday where it was actually nice and sunny. It kind of looks like midnight out there today. It's crazy. I think my vegetable garden's going to drown. That's happened a couple of years in a row where I've had to replant my beans and my peas because they have literally drowned. but the peas just came up and the birds are having a great time eating them. So I'm not sure there's that many peas out there anyway. Okay, so I've come up into the second hole and I'm doing the same thing here. I'm doing the in and out, traveling along with kind of a running stitch, being careful not to pucker it, but keeping it taut. We don't need to hold anything down here because this stitch is holding it in place for us. So, which is nice. We don't have to work around the clip, although I do love those clips. They come in very handy. I'm also a quilter, so I use those for many things. They're really good for holding felt pieces together when you're stitching. I got mine on Amazon, and I think there was like 50 of them for about $7, something like that. So they're also not expensive. Okay, so again, this time I'm coming up through a hole in the dark blue and the light blue. And now I'm turning and I'm going back and filling in the stitches that were missed. And this provides a nice even finish. And I really like that it highlights the sleeves, adds a little bit more interest, and helps to balance Ferguson out. Fergie, I call him for short. I have a lot of Fergies around here. I made a pile of them for samples for Spellbinders and mailed them down to Arizona because they were taking pictures of them for the advertising on the front of the packages that you get when you order them. And then there was also an event that they were going to, I don't know where, but all the Fergies got to travel. They've had a better vacation than I've had this year. Okay, so I'm finished that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over and I'm just going to snip off the excess. And if it's not pretty back here, don't worry about it because it's going to get sewn together anyway. And I am going to do a knot back here because I don't want any of this to come undone. And again, this is all getting sewn together into the seams. So it doesn't matter if you leave a tail or if you have a knot that is not really that pretty, nobody's going to see it because after we sew this together, we're going to be gluing the hands in. So you're not even going to be able to see inside of this sleeve. Okay. So that's finished. And now we're going to do the same thing with the second one, and then I'm going to show you how to stitch them together. Okay, I'm back. I have my two finished, and I'm switching over to my darker thread, which again is DMC 518, and I am working on a chart to match up all of Spellbinders felt colors with matching DMC colors so that we have all matchy-matchy in our projects. And hopefully I will have that done by the time all of this goes live, and you can just check over on my blog and there will be a downloadable PDF that you can print off and make your little charts. Okay, I'm going to use my clips again. I'm lining up the dots on either side of the arm, and we are going to be working seams out. Okay, I have a knot in the end of my thread, and I am going to start inside in the first hole, and then I'm going to bury that knot inside because again it's going to be hidden by the hand that ends up getting glued in here. And I am just going to start into the next hole. You may have to flip back and forth a few times because you're going through 4 pieces of felt at this point, and you want to make sure that you get into the hole on the other side. So just this first couple, because you're going through the trim as well, you just have to flip back and forth, and then you should be good to go because you can see the holes. And again, we're going to do the running stitch, and we're just going to work our way up to the top of the sleeve, and then we're going to turn around and come back down and fill in every second hole that we missed on the first go round. And sorry if I go out of the frame every once in a while. The way my camera is situated above me, I have to have my arms fairly well extended to be able to get in here and do this. So it's a lot of leaning forward and extending your arms and trying to keep everything within the vision of my bifocals because I'm old. This is a whole new experience for me, but it's fun and I hope you're enjoying it too. Okay, just about to the top. And we're back to the 2 stitches, so remember not to pull your thread this way. Try and pull it up and down. I know I do sometimes, but... Okay, we're at the top, and so we're going to turn around and come back down and fill in all of those extra stitches. Oops, get out of there. I'm working with a fairly long thread. You don't need to. You can do individual ones. I do one long thread to do all of these short pieces. So the 2 sleeves and then sewing the fronts to the backs, to the back piece of the coat, all with usually 1 thread. And then when we go to do our blanket stitch around the coat, we're going to need an incredibly long piece of thread for that one. Okay, so just working my way back down. We're almost done here. And again, good time to listen to an audiobook. I get good murder mystery. When you get to the whodunit section, I always find I'm stitching faster. Does that happen to you? Okay, so again, flipping back and forth this time because we're going through the 4 levels of felt again, and you want to make sure that you get your needle up through that hole. Okay, I'm just going to extend my thread there, and then back down through the final one. Okay, and then what I do with this one is I go into the next one up. Okay, into the next one up, and only go to the middle, and then run your needle up through the stitching and come out. So see, I ran it all the way up and then it came out here. I'm going to pull my thread through, and because it's in between the felt, you won't see it. Okay, and then I'm going to snip it off. And that basically hides that last tail. So there's the first sleeve. You're going to do exactly the same thing to the second one, and then I'll be back and we're going to put the main part of the coat together. Okay, I have both my little sleeves done, so I am just going to set those aside, and next we're going to work on the main part of the coat. So this is the back, and then you have 2 fronts. You're going to line them up like this. And again, you want to be able to see through all of the holes. Okay, and I'm going to start at the bottom. So I'm also going to add a couple of clips just to help keep me all lined up. Again, I've got my thread number 518, and this one is kind of the same as the last ones. You're going to go up through the first hole. I've got a little knot in my thread, and I'm just going to tuck that there, and I'm going to just end up sewing it. Actually, I'm going to leave a tail so that we can tie it off. Okay, so leave a tail long enough that you can tie it off and move it out of the way so it doesn't get involved in your stitches. And you're going to start again every second one. You're going to go in and out with your running stitch, and you're just going to work your way all the way up, keeping your stitches as even as possible. Pulling up and down, not sideways. I told you these were easy. The hat's the worst. Once you get that hat down pat, you're laughing. Okay, so I fold this in half like this. I just find it easier to hold onto. And I try and not make a crease in it. Okay. Whoops, I get snagged. So you notice when we get into the embellishments that I have quite a few different occasions in there. I tried to think of as many as I could. So we've got Halloween, we've got Christmas. There's kind of 2 fall ones. There's one for sunflowers, and then there's one for, fall leaves. There's a skull, and pumpkins, and again leaves for Halloween. And then I'm working on one right now. I'm taking that skull and I'm making a Day of the Dead gnome, which is kind of turning out kind of cool. I'm doing a black and white base and then lots of colors for the flowers and stuff. Okay, so I'm at the top and now I'm going to turn around and I'm going to come back and we're going to work our way back down. So there's flowers for Easter and spring. There's snowflakes, so I did a winter one all in different shades of blues and purples, which I really like. There's a Christmas one, and I did the traditional colors. And you can see all of these over on my blog. I took individual pictures of each one of them and posted them on my blog for inspiration for you, for different ways that you could use the 2 embellishment packs that are released along with the Ferguson base dies. So the base die for Ferguson, or Fergus, I'm calling him all kinds of names today, aren't I? Is just the basics to make the entire gnome, but there's no decoration dies in that actual package. They're in separate packages. Otherwise, the die set would have been just way too big and way too expensive. Okay, so again, I'm staying on the inside when I'm doing these stitches back down to keep the stitches even and nicely placed, and then I'm not splitting my threads. So what I mean by that is I'm staying on the inside, this side of the circle that I'm putting my needle through. Okay. And I just stuck it through the wrong one. Too busy gabbing. There we go. Now we'll fix that. We'll go through this one. There we are, back on track. Okay, and we're just about back down to the bottom, and what I'm going to do at the bottom is I'm going to cut off my thread, but leave a tail, and then we will go on the inside of the coat, and we will tie a knot, and that gets buried into the seam anyway. So, okay, so we started in the second one, so there's going to be one at the bottom here that is missing. You want to go all the way through, again, just like we did on the sleeve, okay? And then you're going to come back and you're going to go into the second one, but only halfway, and you're going to open up your coat, okay? Go into the second one, hole, and then go to the inside. Easier said than done. There we go. I keep getting, with the sharp needle, I keep getting stuck in the felt for the back. Okay, so pull that through. Make sure that you don't have any loops or anything on the front. Okay, and then I'm going to cut this thread. And I'm going to tie it off. And I like to do a double knot just to make sure everything's really good and secure. And don't pull it too tight, but you want it right up against your stitching so that you can trim it. There. Okay, and now we're going to do exactly the same thing with the other side, but I'm not going to make you sit through that, so we'll see you in a minute. Here we go. We have the base of our coat finished, and we have 2 little arms, and now we're ready to put these together. So you're going to take one of your little sleeves, and you're going to fold it this way. So the seam is at the back, okay? And when you squish this together, you will notice that there are 2 sets of little holes up here. We are going to line those up with the 2 sets of holes. There's one there and one there at the top of the coat. And so you're going to need all of your fingers and most of your toes to hold this together. You're going to flatten this right in the middle, and then you're going to put this right up against the outside seam on the coat, right in the middle of it. And so the outside 2 holes in your sleeve will line up with the holes on the inside of your coat, or somewhere close to it. Now, I like to split the seams right at the top, but what I have found is if down here, if the seam is just a little bit in front of your coat sleeve, it makes the arms sit forward a tiny little bit. And I'm going to show you when we get to the embellishment page or video how I made a scepter for him to hold on to. So having the arms facing a little bit to the front is helpful in that instance. So you're holding on to this up here in the center. See, I've got my seams right over top of each other. Okay. And then at the bottom, my seam is just in front of the coat seam. Hold on to that for dear life. And I move my fingers down just a little bit to get out of the way. I have a knot in the end of my needle, and again I'm using 5/1/8 because I want these stitches to blend in with the felt. And so what I'm going to do is from the back, I'm going to come up and come through that first hole in the sleeve, and I'm going to go over to the second hole on the right hand side, and I'm going to go back down through the second hole in the coat, and I'm going to make a stitch and pull that quite tight. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to come up through the first hole that was there. So the stitch is on the right hand side. I'm coming up on the left hole of that stitch, and I'm going to go right down through the middle. And this is going to go right over top of both the seams, and there's no hole there, so don't look for one. There is a hole on the back in the coat. That's just the way the dies lined up when they got sewn together. Okay, so again, pull that tight. Then I'm going to go all the way over to the left-hand side, and I'm going to use the hole in the back of the coat, and then my needle is going to come up through the hole on the very left-hand side of the sleeve. Okay? And then I'm going to line up that with the stitch that I have in the middle, and I'm going to go down through the left-hand side of that stitch all the way through all the felt. Now, in order to keep this from flapping around, I found that the best thing to do was to repeat this twice so that it was really, really, really good and strong. So again, starting all the way over on the left-hand or the right-hand side, I'm going to go up and down through those same holes. Then I'm going to come up on the left side of that stitch, and I'm going to go down through the middle, right over top of the one that I just did, into that next hole. Then I'm going to go all the way to the left-hand side of the sleeve, and I'm going to come back and go into the left-hand side of that center stitch. And with those 6 stitches, that's enough to hold this in place. And then if you're going to do the blanket stitch around the outside edge, you're also going to encompass this, so this will further secure it. But even if you don't want to do the blanket stitch, this is firm, it's not going anywhere, and it's going to be darn cute. Okay, so I'm flipping to the inside, and I do have my little knot over here. I'm going to go right through the knot and tie off my thread. And the reason I'm not worrying about this too much and I'm leaving the knot exposed is it's going to be on the inside. It's also going to be covered by his beard. So unless you physically take the coat off and have a look at it on the inside, nobody's ever going to see it. And even with these ones, because they're tone on tone, they're very, very hard to see. Okay, so I'm just going to cut that tail of a thread off. There's my finished stitch on the inside. It's almost invisible. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on this side, and I'm going to let the camera run just in case you need a second go at learning how to do this. I'm putting a knot in the end of my thread. I'm folding down my sleeve so that the seam is at the center back. I'm lining that up right over top of the seam on my coat, securing it with my finger and thumb to keep it in place, and I'm lining up the holes at the top of both, coming in from the back I'm coming up through the hole right there. Okay. That hole, coming up, and then going to the right and going down through that hole, which is going to line up with the hole in my coat. Even if it doesn't line up with the hole in the coat, it's close enough. Coming back through the hole on the left-hand side of the stitch, back down through the middle, and you should be lining up a hole on the back of that. Oops, I got a little knot in my thread. One moment, please. There we go. Okay. Coming all the way over to the left-hand side, and my needle is going through that final hole on the left-hand side, and then it's going down through the left of the middle stitch. And then there's my 3 stitches right across the top. Okay? And I'm going to repeat for the strength. So, up to the left-hand side of the left-hand side of the right stitch, easy for me to say. Back down, back up again through the left side of the right stitch, down to the middle, over to the very left-hand side, left stitch, and then back down through the left side of the middle one. And again, flipping it open to the inside, finding the knot that I started over here, and tying my thread off. Okay, you want to keep everything here nice and firm, but don't add any puckers. You don't want to pull it that hard that it puckers, because you also don't want to tear any of this. Okay, so there we have our little coat. He's all done, front and back. Okay, and now I'm going to blanket stitch this. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I really find that it provides a really nice detail for the finishing of the coat. So I'm going to get my thread ready and we'll be right back. Okay, once again, you want a very long thread, and I go overkill on this. Mine's probably, I don't know, 1.5 yards, 1.5 meters. And again, I'm using 3031. My preferred color is actually 3371, but I couldn't find it when I started this video. Turns out it was downstairs with another cross-stitch project that I was working on. So I went and dug it out. But of course, I don't want to change now because I have already done the stitching in video number 2 on the top of the hat. And so we want these 2 colors to match. And this 3371 is a little bit darker, and it would be noticeable. Okay, so we're going to move on. Okay, with my big, huge, long thread, I am expecting to have some knots, but that's just the way the ball bounces. Okay, you can start anywhere you want, but I like to start somewhere where it's going to be hidden. And when you put your gnome together, you'll notice that the beard covers the top whole, the beard and the hat cover the top whole part of the coat. So by starting up here in one of the sleeves, not only am I able to bury the knot into the seam so that I don't have to worry about pulling it through because you're too busy holding on to the thread trying to get your blanket stitch nice and even. And then when you get to your first corner and you work your way down all the way along, all the way around. So one thing I will say, if you run out of thread, try and stop at one of the seams, okay? So you've got 4 chances, here, 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 and here. So if you accidentally don't get your thread long enough, stop and start there because it gives you the opportunity to hide your knots, and you have to do a double stitch to kind of get everything going and joining up your previous stitching, and it's a good place to hide it. All right, so starting from the back, we are going to come through, and I start off coming right through those stitches that we used, okay, when we were putting the sleeve on. So I'm going to come up from there for my very first start, just to get things going. And like I said, my thread is very long. Okay, so thread over my fingers to keep it out of the way. Okay, and coming from the front, I'm going to do my first stitch And pull, 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 pull. And gently but firmly get it in place. And then holding my thread again. This also helps to keep the knots out of it. Longer thread does have a tendency to knot easier. And I'm going to start my stitches and try and keep them as even as I can. And when the thread is really long and when you're first starting, this is a slow process. Don't get frustrated with it. You want to ensure that you're getting as close as you can to your stitches all being the same length. And when it comes to the sleeve on this coat, I am going to put one little extra stitch in there, and that's just going to help hold it down and keep it looking nice and professional. Okay, so then we've got a couple of stitches to go before we get to the corner. Got one there, and I'm going to sneak in one more here before we turn. Okay, I like that. This one I'm going to do at an angle. And be careful not to pull this too tight, and you want the thread to go over top of the corner. It just adds a nice little finish to it. And don't pull that too tight. You'll get to do that on the next one. So the next one, we're going to go right here, and we're going to finish off our corner. So you're going to have 3 stitches in these sharp corners. And there's only 2 sharp corners. Everything else is on an angle. And it works really well. You just have to be careful not to pull too hard and to line everything up on your last 2 stitches. So I'm just pulling everything into place. And now this one looks like it's gathered and it's really close. And it is. But when I do the next stitch, it's going to even everything out. Okay, so the corners are the worst. Just take your time, go around them nice. There we go. Okay, so I should have made this stitch right here. I should have made it a little bit longer so that it all came up and down in the same spot. But the beard's going to cover that. So just try and get all 3 of them in there and it'll look a little bit neater. Okay, so then you're just going to work your way around. Keeping your stitches as even as possible. And watch a movie or listen to your novel. I often have music on. Quite often I take this part downstairs and watch TV with Ian at nighttime. I have a nice bright light over top of my chair that I like to sit in, and it just makes the time go faster. There's no fast way of doing this, and you want it. You know, you want your stitches nice and even. You want a nice professional looking finish. And if you're a little bit worried about your stitching, and you're learning it or you're not comfortable with it, try doing a tone on tone. I've got one here I can show you. Oh, I haven't. Yeah, I did. Okay, so here's it. I used almost a tone on tone to do this one, and it doesn't stand out as much. Okay, so if you happen to make a little boo-boo or they're not quite straight, anything like that, it's a little bit more forgiving, and it's also a very nice finish. Okay, so we're just going to keep working on this. You're just going to go all the way around and you're going to come back and finish. And I'm not going to make you watch me do the whole thing. So see you in a few minutes. Okay, here we are all finished. So here is the outside, and that's what it looks like. And you'll see that the stitching went over top of the sleeves. So now they're nice and firmly in place. And when you close it, you have this beautiful stitch detail all the way around your adorable little coat, front and back. Cute or what? All right, so that finishes the coat. And so I am going to pat this back. This is how I set up my craft stack. This is one of the large ones. Okay, and they stack So the next thing we're going to work on is the body of Fergus. So you're going to need those 3 pieces, and we're going to save the beard and the nose and hands until the last. And so I'm just going to tuck this in here. I'm going to need this thread, and then I stack these on top of each other. I still have all the tools that I need. Everything is tucked in there nice and tight. So then I'm all ready to go with my next project. And I get a ton of questions about my pincushion every time I do a video. This came from Chinatown in, where was I? San Francisco. So the next time you're in a Chinatown near you, pop into one of their little stores that sells all kinds of cute little things and check this out. I just absolutely love this. I've probably had this for 35 years and it's still in beautiful condition. It's all made out of satin, all these little guys holding around the little pincushion. I am going to tape the next one tomorrow morning, and it is Fergus's little body, and then we're going to attach his beard and his nose. So come on back. We'll see you then.